A lone human raised an alien girl no one wanted. The ending stunned the galaxy. Marcus had always known what it meant to be alone. Ever since the fall of his homeworld, Earth, he had lived a quiet, solitary life on the barren planet of Distress 7. It was an isolated world, far from the center of galactic politics and wars. The harsh winds of the planet blasted across the empty landscape, and the only sounds were the echoes of his own footsteps in the dusty hills. He had left his past behind, escaping the chaos that had ravaged the galaxy after the destruction of Earth. For years, Marcus kept to himself. He had no family left, no friends. His comrades from the military had either died in battle or drifted away, lost in the madness of the ongoing intergalactic conflicts. The war that had shattered his world had also shattered the universe, leaving planets in ruins and civilizations on the brink of collapse. But none of it mattered to Marcus anymore. He had made peace with the loneliness. Then, one evening, his life changed forever. The distress signal came through late at night, flickering weakly across his communication console. It wasn't unusual to hear distress signals in this part of the galaxy. The Outer Rim was known for its lawlessness and uncharted sectors. But this signal was different. It carried the unmistakable signs of an emergency, with the faint cries of a child audible in the background. He hesitated. Marcus had no desire to get involved in anyone's problems, yet something in the voice of the signal tugged at his heart. It was a simple, coded transmission, a plea for help. The message included coordinates that pointed to a nearby abandoned starship, stranded and drifting on the edge of Distress 7 orbit. Against his better judgment, Marcus decided to investigate. He didn't expect much, perhaps a malfunctioning system or a ship in need of repairs. But when he reached the wreckage, he was met with a sight that would haunt him forever. There, lying in the wrecked remains of a small alien ship, was a child. A tiny girl, no older than 5 or 6, her skin a shimmering, iridescent blue that glowed faintly in the dim light of the starship's ruined interior. She was curled in a small, protective ball, her large, round eyes wide with fear and confusion. Marcus had never seen an alien like her before. Her species was not one that had ever been encountered by humans, or anyone for that matter. Her people were so rare, so mysterious, that they were considered little more than legends. But here she was, real and helpless. He knelt beside her, his heart racing with uncertainty. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes locked onto his with a desperate intensity. There was no doubt that she had been abandoned, left to die in the cold vacuum of space by whoever had been responsible for the wreck. Marcus felt a pang of sympathy deep within him, something he hadn't felt in years. The instinct to help, to protect, surged through him like a flood. Without a second thought, Marcus scooped the child into his arms and made his way back to his home. He didn't know what he would do with her, or why he had even bothered to save her. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her there to die alone. Back at his cabin, Marcus laid the girl down on a small cot in the corner of his living room. She was malnourished, her small frame weak and fragile, but she was alive. Marcus didn't know how long she had been alone in the wreckage, but it was clear she had been through something traumatic. He gently wiped the dirt and dust from her face, and she flinched at his touch, as if unfamiliar with the kindness. After a long moment of silence, the girl spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. Who are you?" Marcus paused. He wasn't sure how to answer. "I'm Marcus," he said simply. "I'm just a man who found you." The girl seemed to consider this for a moment before speaking again. I don't want to be alone." Marcus' heart twisted at her words. He had been alone for so long, but he had never felt the kind of loneliness this child must have felt. It was a loneliness that went deeper than just the absence of people. It was a kind of isolation that came from being abandoned, from having no one to trust. "You're not alone anymore," Marcus said softly. "I'll take care of you." From that moment on, Marcus became her guardian. He didn't know why he had chosen to help her or why he had brought her into his home. Perhaps it was because, despite everything, he couldn't stand the idea of leaving her to fend for herself. Or perhaps it was because, deep down, he saw a reflection of himself in her, a lonely soul in need of a family. Over the next few days, Marcus did his best to care for the girl. He gave her food, water, and warmth. He cleaned her up and did what he could to ease her pain. But it was clear that she was far from ordinary. The girl's eyes were full of intelligence, and she seemed to understand things beyond her years. Her gaze was always searching, as though she were trying to understand the world around her, to make sense of her strange new reality. At first, she didn't speak much, but over time, she began to open up to Marcus. She told him her name was Zara. She didn't remember much about her past, only flashes of memories that were fragmented and hazy. She knew she had been part of a larger family, a group of aliens that had once traveled through the stars. But her family was gone now. She didn't know why they had been destroyed or who had done it, but she was certain that she was the last of her kind. Marcus didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. It was clear that Zara had been through something unimaginable, and he wasn't in a position to pry. Instead, he focused on giving her the only thing he could, safety. He tried to make her feel as comfortable as possible, as though she were truly at home. The days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Marcus found himself growing more attached to Zara than he had ever expected. She was smart, curious, and kind-hearted. Despite the pain she carried, she still tried to smile, to make the best of her new life. She would sit with him at night and ask about Earth, about what his world had been like before it was destroyed. Sometimes she would draw pictures of the stars, of distant planets, of the things she had dreamed of seeing one day. Marcus couldn't help but wonder what the future held for Zara. The galaxy was not kind to beings like her. The political factions, the military organizations, the bounty hunters, they would all come for her eventually. He had no doubt that her abilities, whatever they might be, would attract attention. And when that happened, he wasn't sure if he could protect her. But for now, all he could do was give her a life worth living. He had made a promise to himself and to her. She would never be alone again. Little did Marcus know, the moment he had taken Zara into his care, he had set off a chain of events that would change the galaxy forever. And as the universe watched from the shadows, the question remained, would Zara's presence be a blessing or a curse? As the years passed on Distress 7, Marcus settled into an unexpected routine. His life, once quiet and solitary, had become something far different. Zara, his adopted daughter, grew each day, her physical features becoming more defined as her alien nature took shape. Her shimmering blue skin, her long, graceful limbs, and her silvery white hair set her apart from every human he had ever known. But it was the things beneath the surface that truly made her unique. By the age of 10, Zara had already displayed abilities Marcus could not explain. At first, it was small things. Objects would float slightly above the table when her emotions ran high. She could manipulate light and dark with the simplest of gestures, casting long, eerie shadows with a wave of her hand. Marcus had thought they were just the signs of a child's imagination, but soon he realized they were something far more powerful. Zara's telekinetic abilities grew stronger with each passing day. She could move things around the cabin with her mind, sometimes without even thinking. The first time it happened, Marcus had watched, astonished, as the firewood in the corner of the room began to levitate, slowly moving toward the fireplace. Zara had stared at it with wide eyes, a mixture of surprise and fear on her face. She hadn't meant to do it, but it was clear she had control, at least some of the time. It wasn't just telekinesis. Zara had a knack for reading emotions, too. She could tell how Marcus was feeling before he even spoke, sometimes before he even knew himself. It was like she could sense the thoughts and feelings of others, and it made her unusually perceptive for her age. She often asked questions about the nature of emotions, the meaning of love, or the idea of family. She seemed to be trying to understand the things that made humans so different from her own kind. Marcus did his best to help her make sense of it all. He taught her about Earth's history, the civilizations that had once thrived before the wars, the culture, and the stories of human achievements. Zara listened intently, fascinated by the world he described to her, but she was always quick to ask the difficult questions. Why did humans destroy each other? She would ask, her eyes filled with confusion. Why did you fight so much? Marcus didn't have an answer. He could only tell her that some things didn't make sense, that sometimes people were afraid or selfish or just didn't understand one another. Zara had always been a curious child, but as she grew older, her curiosity turned into a quiet determination to understand not just her origins, but her place in a galaxy that had always seen her kind as a threat. Despite her growing abilities, Marcus tried to keep Zara's talents hidden. He had no idea what might happen if the outside world discovered her powers. He had heard whispers of a war raging across the galaxy, of factions vying for power, and he feared Zara would be seen as just another weapon to be controlled or destroyed. So he kept her abilities a secret, teaching her to suppress them when others were near. But even in their isolation, there were signs that someone or something was watching them. Strange ships would occasionally pass through Distress 7 orbit, their sensors scanning the planet's surface, searching for something they couldn't see. Marcus would notice the glint of lights in the sky at night, far too distant to be anything natural. His training as a soldier had taught him to be cautious, and he was quick to recognize the signs of surveillance. It wasn't long before the first visitors arrived. They came on a cold, quiet evening, a single ship that landed near the edge of Marcus's property. At first, Marcus thought it was a malfunctioning cargo ship, stranded and in need of assistance. But when the doors opened, he knew something was wrong. The beings who stepped out were not human. They were tall, their features angular and sharp, with skin that shimmered in the moonlight like polished metal. Their eyes glowed faintly, a soft blue light that matched Zara's. The leader of the group approached Marcus, his expression unreadable. "We are from the Galactic Council," he said in a voice that was both formal and cold. "We are here to inquire about the presence of an alien child." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He knew exactly what they were talking about. The Council had been searching for Zara ever since they had learned of her survival. Their intentions were clear. They wanted to either control her or eliminate her. The Council had long been wary of Zara's species, considering them too dangerous to be left unchecked. To them, she was an anomaly, a potential threat to the balance of power across the galaxy. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just a man living alone. There's no child here." The Council agents exchanged a glance, then turned their attention to the cabin. Zara was watching from a window, her eyes wide with fear. Marcus didn't know how they had detected her, but it was clear they had found her. The last thing he wanted was for them to know the truth. "We know she is here," the leader continued, his tone growing more insistent. "We have been tracking her. We have a duty to ensure she is not a danger to the galaxy." Marcus stood his ground. "I won't let you take her." The leader's expression darkened. "You do not understand the gravity of the situation, human. If she is allowed to grow uncontrolled, she could become a weapon. Her kind has caused untold devastation in the past. The galaxy cannot afford to allow such a creature to live free." Zara stepped into the doorway, her gaze steady. "I am not a weapon," she said softly. "I do not wish to hurt anyone." The Council agents looked at her with a mix of fear and contempt. "You do not have a choice," the leader said, his voice cold. "You are a danger and you must be taken into custody." Before Marcus could react, Zara's powers flared to life. In an instant, the ground around them cracked, and the air seemed to hum with energy. The Council agents took a step back, their eyes wide with shock. Zara was not trying to attack them. She was simply trying to protect herself, to keep them away. Marcus stepped forward, his heart racing. "Zara, stop!" he called, but it was too late. The energy swirling around her grew stronger, a bright, blinding light that enveloped her small body. "Zara!" Marcus shouted again, but it was as if she couldn't hear him over the roar of her own powers. The air was thick with electricity, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The Council agents retreated, their weapons drawn, but Marcus could see the fear in their eyes. Zara had only intended to protect herself, but her powers were beyond anything they had ever encountered. The leader of the group gave a signal, and the agents opened fire, their weapons unleashing beams of concentrated energy at Zara. In that moment, something inside Marcus snapped. He couldn't let them hurt her. Without thinking, he lunged forward, placing himself between Zara and the Council's weapons. "No!" he screamed, and his voice seemed to carry more power than it ever had before. His protective instinct flared, and without fully understanding how, Marcus felt the energy in the air shift. The weapon's energy beams stopped in midair, suspended by some unseen force. It was as if Marcus had willed it into existence, as though the universe itself had answered his call. Zara's eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. For the first time, she felt safe. In that moment, she wasn't the weapon the galaxy feared. She wasn't the girl they wanted to control. She was simply Zara, and Marcus was her protector. The leader of the Council agents took a step back, realizing that they were no longer in control. "This is not over," he said, his voice tight with anger and fear. "You will regret this." With that, the Council agents retreated, disappearing into the night, leaving Marcus and Zara alone once more. Zara's powers faded, and the ground beneath them settled. The danger had passed, but Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. As he looked at Zara, his heart was heavy with the knowledge that their peaceful life on Distress 7 could no longer last. The galaxy would come for her, and when it did, they would face a fight that neither of them was ready for. But one thing was certain: Marcus would protect her. No matter the cost, the days that followed the Council's visit were tense. Marcus had always known that life on Distress 7 wasn't going to be easy, but he hadn't imagined that it would escalate so quickly. Zara's powers had grown to a level where they couldn't hide from the galaxy any longer. The Council's warning still echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done with him, or with Zara. It wasn't long before the next group arrived. This time they didn't come with weapons or threats. Instead, a sleek silver ship descended from the sky, its design unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The ship landed quietly outside the cabin, casting long shadows in the pale light of the planet's twin moons. Zara was in the garden, tending to a small patch of alien plants she had started growing after Marcus had taught her how to care for Earth species. She always found peace in the quiet moments, surrounded by nature. But when she saw the ship, her face tightened and she instinctively stepped back, her eyes darting to Marcus. He was already moving toward her. "Stay inside, Zara," Marcus said, his voice steady but his heart pounding. There was something in the air, something he couldn't quite explain, but he knew it wasn't good. Zara nodded without a word, but her gaze lingered on the ship as she disappeared into the house. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching the ship's doors open slowly. He didn't know who they were, but he had a bad feeling. Out of the ship stepped a tall figure, dressed in the ceremonial robes of the Galactic Union, a federation of planets known for its diplomacy and power. The figure was humanoid, but his features were sleek and metallic, with skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, much like Zara's. He wasn't alone. Behind him, 3 other individuals, also from different species, stood with arms crossed, their eyes fixed on Marcus. The leader of the group, the one dressed in the most elaborate robes, approached Marcus with an air of authority. "Marcus, is it?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied the newcomers, trying to gauge their intentions. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone cautious. "We are emissaries from the Galactic Union," the leader said, his voice carrying a weight of importance. "We've come to discuss the situation regarding the child." Zara appeared at the door, her presence commanding attention. The moment the leader's eyes landed on her, there was a flicker of recognition. "It's her," he said softly, as though speaking to himself. "The last of her kind." Zara's gaze was steady, but Marcus could sense her unease. She knew what that meant. The galaxy had always seen her as something dangerous, something that had the potential to bring about destruction. To her, it wasn't just about her abilities, it was about her existence. "I'm Zara," she said quietly, stepping forward but not leaving the safety of Marcus's side. The leader's eyes softened for a brief moment, but he quickly masked the expression with a neutral look. "We know who you are, child," he said, "and we know what you are capable of, but we are not here to take you away. We're here to offer you something." Marcus bristled at the words. "What kind of offer?" he asked, trying to keep the suspicion out of his voice. The leader gestured for the others to step forward. One of them, a woman with green skin and glowing eyes, stepped closer to Zara. "You are an anomaly," the woman said, her voice almost gentle. "You are the key to something greater. We have the resources and the knowledge to help you control your abilities, to guide you in understanding them. You don't have to be afraid of yourself anymore." Zara looked from the woman to Marcus, her expression uncertain. "What do you want in exchange?" she asked quietly, her voice small but sharp, revealing the mistrust that had grown inside her over the years. The leader smiled slightly. "We want to offer you a place in the Union," he said. "You could be the ambassador of your species, the one who bridges the gap between your people and the rest of the galaxy. In return, you would help us with your abilities to help stabilize the galaxy. You could become a force for peace, Zara." The words sounded almost too good to be true. A part of Marcus wanted to believe them. After all, they weren't threatening her, not directly. They were offering her a way out of the life they had led on Distress 7, a chance for Zara to be part of something bigger. But another part of him was suspicious. There was always a catch. "I don't need anyone's help," Zara replied, her voice firm. She looked at Marcus, and he could see the resolve in her eyes. She didn't want to be part of their politics. She didn't want to be used as a weapon, even if it meant a chance at belonging. The thought of being manipulated, of being a tool for the Union's agendas, repulsed her. The leader's smile faded slightly, his tone growing more serious. You are not in a position to refuse, child. The Union has resources you cannot even comprehend. We have seen what you can do, what you could become. You don't have the luxury of choosing a quiet life in isolation. Your powers will attract attention. There are those who want to use you for far darker purposes. If you stay here, you will only put yourself and your guardian in danger. Marcus clenched his fists. You don't get to decide what's best for her, he said, stepping forward, his voice rising with anger. I've been taking care of her all these years, and she doesn't need anyone to tell her what to do. She's not a tool for your political games. The leader raised a hand, signaling for Marcus to calm down. We are not your enemies, human, he said softly. We're here to offer Zara a choice. It's not just about her abilities, it's about her future. You must understand, the galaxy cannot afford to let someone like her remain in the shadows. Whether you like it or not, the galaxy will come for her. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she listened. She understood what he was saying. She wasn't safe, not really. The galaxy would never let her be. The more she thought about it, the more the idea of leaving Distress 7, of joining the Union, seemed like a way out. She wouldn't have to hide. She wouldn't have to fear her powers anymore. But there was something else that tugged at her heart, a sense of belonging to the place she had called home for so long, to Marcus, who had always been there for her. I won't go with you, Zara said finally, her voice steady. I don't want your peace or your protection. I just want to be left alone. I want to live my life on my terms. The leader's expression hardened, though there was still a trace of understanding in his eyes. Very well, he said, turning to his companions. We cannot force you, but be warned, Zara, this is not over. The galaxy will never forget you, and soon you will have no choice but to confront your destiny. Marcus stood beside Zara, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. We'll be ready, he said firmly. You can't control her. No one can. The leader gave them one last look before signaling for the others to board their ship. As the doors closed and the ship lifted off the ground, Marcus let out a long breath. Zara looked up at him, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile, but it was one that spoke of resilience, of defiance. You were right, she said softly. We don't need them. We've made it this far on our own. Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with pride. We'll continue to make it together. But deep down, he knew that their peace was fragile. The galaxy had already set its sights on Zara, and soon they would have to face a much bigger fight than they ever imagined. The days that followed the departure of the Galactic Union emissaries were filled with an uneasy calm. Marcus had hoped that their warning would be the end of it, that the galaxy might let Zara live her life in peace. But deep down, he knew that wasn't going to happen. The Union's visit had made it clear. Zara was a threat, or at least she was seen that way. No matter how much Marcus wanted to keep her hidden, the universe had already marked her. Zara, too, seemed to understand this. She spent hours sitting by the window of their cabin, staring out at the barren landscape of Distress 7. Marcus knew she was thinking about the same things he was. What would become of them? Could they continue to live in isolation, or would the galaxy eventually come for them, demanding answers or, worse, control? Zara's powers had only grown stronger. It wasn't just telekinesis anymore. She could now manipulate the weather, control the very air around her. Marcus had watched as storms formed around her, swirling in the air before dissipating as she calmed her mind. Sometimes it was like the planet itself responded to her moods. When she was upset, the winds would pick up. When she was calm, the clouds would clear. Her abilities were both a blessing and a curse. She had the power to protect herself, but she also had the power to destroy, a truth that weighed heavily on both of them. Every time Marcus saw her struggle with her emotions, he feared that one day she might lose control. That fear became a reality when the next group came. They arrived in the dead of night, a group of heavily armed mercenaries. Their ship was a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky, sleek and menacing. Marcus had no doubt who had sent them. The bounty hunters, hired by an unknown party, were not here to negotiate. They were here to take Zara, whether she went willingly or not. The first sign of trouble came when a bright light flashed across the sky, cutting through the stillness of the night. Marcus immediately knew what it was, a landing craft. He had trained for this kind of moment, but nothing could prepare him for what was about to unfold. He grabbed Zara, pulling her into the shadows of the cabin. "Stay inside," he whispered urgently, his voice tight with fear. "Don't come out until I tell you." Zara nodded, her eyes wide with understanding. She didn't argue. She knew better than to question him now. Marcus moved swiftly, grabbing the blaster he had kept hidden for years, the one he had sworn he would never use again. He hadn't needed it in all their time on Distress 7, but now it felt like the only thing between Zara and the danger that had finally caught up with them. He stepped outside, his heart racing. The mercenaries were already setting up a perimeter around the cabin, their shadows moving silently in the night. Marcus couldn't see their faces, but he knew they had come for one thing: Zara. He didn't hesitate. He raised the blaster, aiming for the nearest mercenary. But just as he pulled the trigger, a loud crack filled the air, followed by an explosion that sent Marcus flying to the ground. The force of the blast knocked him out of breath, his ears ringing as he struggled to get up. A voice echoed through the smoke. "We've got him." "Secure the perimeter." Marcus tried to move, but his body felt like lead. He had no idea how many were out there, or how they had managed to get so close without him noticing. The cabin, once a safe haven, now felt like a trap, surrounded on all sides by enemies he couldn't fight off. Then he heard her voice. It was soft at first, but it grew stronger as the ground beneath them shook. "No," Zara whispered, her voice filled with a quiet fury. "You will not take him." Before Marcus could stop her, a blinding light flashed from inside the cabin. The mercenaries, still recovering from the blast, froze as the ground trembled beneath them. A whirlwind of energy spun around Zara, lifting her off the ground, her glowing eyes locked onto the intruders. The very air around them crackled with her power, the storm building as she struggled to control it. Marcus had never seen her like this before. She was furious, and her power was growing out of control. "No, Zara, stop!" he shouted, his voice hoarse as he struggled to push himself to his feet. He could see her figure surrounded by a violent surge of energy, her face a mask of concentration and anger. The wind howled around her, and the mercenaries were scrambling, trying to find cover, but it was clear they were no match for her. But Zara wasn't listening. Her powers surged, and the storm around her intensified, pulling the mercenaries toward her. The air thickened, becoming charged with electricity. It was as if the very planet had come alive, responding to Zara's emotions. The wind howled and twisted, lifting rocks and debris into the air. "Zara!" Marcus shouted, fear and desperation in his voice. The storm stopped abruptly. For a moment, everything was still. The wind fell silent, the air heavy with tension. The mercenaries were frozen, their eyes wide with terror. They had underestimated her, just as he had feared. And then Zara's eyes softened, the anger dissipating, replaced by an expression of sadness and regret. The storm faded, the wind calming as she slowly floated back to the ground, her body trembling with the effort to control the power she had unleashed. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I wanted to protect you." Marcus rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. He didn't know what to say. He had never seen her lose control like that, and the fear of what she could do was overwhelming. But at the same time, he knew that she was still just a child, trying to navigate a universe that saw her as a weapon, not a person. The mercenaries, still stunned, began to regroup. They realized they were not going to win this fight. They had underestimated Zara's power, but they weren't about to give up. With a signal from their leader, they began to retreat, pulling back to their ship. Marcus didn't trust them to leave, not without one last confrontation. He moved quickly, pulling Zara behind him as he drew the blaster again. But before he could get a shot off, the air shifted, and a voice rang out, loud and commanding. "Stop!" The mercenaries froze. The voice wasn't human. Marcus turned, his heart sinking as he saw who was standing there. It was the same figure from the Galactic Union, the leader who had come to offer Zara a place in their organization. The leader's face was grim, his eyes cold. "This is not your fight," the leader said, his voice firm. "Step aside, human." Marcus didn't move. "No," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "She's not going with you. You can't just take her." The leader didn't respond. Instead, he raised a hand, signaling to the mercenaries. They hesitated but ultimately obeyed. They began to withdraw, leaving Zara and Marcus standing alone. "Zara, come with us," the leader said, his tone softer now. "The galaxy will never leave you alone, you know that. You don't have to fight it. You can control your destiny. Come with us and you can be part of something bigger. The Union can offer you a future." Zara looked at Marcus, and for a long moment the two of them stood in silence. The weight of the decision hung heavily between them. It wasn't just about safety anymore. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about who Zara was meant to be and where she could find a place in the galaxy. Finally, Zara spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I've already made my choice." The leader's expression darkened. "You'll regret this." Zara stood tall, her head held high. "I won't." With that, the leader gave a sharp nod to his mercenaries. Without another word, he turned and left, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the night. The danger had passed for now, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy would never let them be. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Zara had made her decision, and together they would face whatever came next. The days that followed the mercenaries' retreat were quieter, but Marcus knew they were only moments of calm before another storm. He had seen the look in the leader of the Galactic Union's eyes, the way they had glinted with quiet resolve. The Union would not give up on Zara. No matter how hard he fought to keep her safe, the galaxy had already decided that she would not remain hidden forever. The weight of that truth pressed down on him, but there was something else, too, something that stirred in his chest as he watched Zara find her place again within their small home on Distress 7. Zara had changed after that night. The wild storms and chaos of her emotions had subsided, replaced by a quiet determination. It was clear to Marcus that she had made a choice, a decision about her place in the universe. She no longer seemed like a lost child trying to make sense of her powers. She had begun to understand them, and with that understanding came a calm strength that Marcus hadn't seen before. She was learning to control herself, to master the force that lived within her. One evening, as the sun set behind the jagged hills of Distress 7, Marcus and Zara sat together on the porch of their cabin, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky. It had become their routine, just the two of them, the only constant in a world that had always seemed unpredictable. "I think I understand now," Zara said, her voice soft but steady. Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the change in her tone. "Understand what?" "I understand why I have these powers," she replied, turning to look at him. "It's not about destruction, it's about creation, about making things better, about helping people." Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always known that Zara was more than just a weapon, but hearing her say it out loud made it all feel more real. She wasn't just a child of war, a survivor of a broken galaxy. She was something more, something powerful, something that could heal, not just harm. "I think you're right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've always had that in you, Zara. You've always wanted to help." Zara looked up at the stars, her eyes bright with determination. "The galaxy isn't perfect. There are so many people who are hurting, who need help. I want to be the one to help them." Marcus could feel the weight of her decision, the quiet resolve that filled her words. It wasn't just about her powers anymore. It was about who she had become, the person she had chosen to be. And for the first time since they had arrived on Distress 7, Marcus felt a sense of peace. Zara had found her purpose. But that peace didn't last long. No sooner had they begun to relax than the sound of a ship's engines broke the silence, low and rumbling in the distance. It wasn't the first time they had heard that sound. Marcus had learned to recognize it as the hum of a ship that wasn't there by accident. The galaxy had returned to collect its payment. Marcus stood quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster hidden beneath his coat. Zara, too, tensed beside him. She had come to recognize the sounds of danger just as he had. "Stay here," Marcus said, though he knew she wouldn't listen. She never did. Zara looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice firm. She didn't need to ask for permission anymore. She was no longer the frightened girl who had needed protection. She was the protector now. Marcus sighed, his heart heavy with the knowledge that this moment would come. It had to. The galaxy would not leave them alone. But this time they weren't running. This time they were ready. They moved toward the edge of the cabin, where the ship had landed, its massive silhouette blocking out the stars. The air was thick with tension. The ship's engines powered down, and the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the figures who had come for them. The first to step out was the same leader of the Galactic Union, his expression unreadable. Behind him were several armed soldiers, their eyes scanning the area with practiced precision. They were ready for a fight, but Marcus could see that the leader wasn't here for violence. Not yet. We've come to make this easy, Marcus, the leader said, his voice calm but authoritative. We don't want to fight, we just want Zara. Zara stepped forward, her chin lifted high. I'm not going with you, she said, her voice steady. I'm not a weapon for you to control. I have a purpose now, and it's not part of your agenda. The leader's eyes flickered with frustration, but he didn't show it. You don't understand, Zara. You are a unique being. You could be the key to uniting the galaxy, to bringing peace to worlds that have been at war for centuries. You don't have to hide anymore. You have the power to make a real difference. Zara shook her head, her expression resolute. I don't need your peace. I don't need your control. I'll find my own way to make a difference. Marcus stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder in silent support. He had seen this moment coming, but now that it was here, he wasn't afraid. Zara had found her strength, and he would stand by her no matter what. The leader sighed as though he had expected this answer. Then we have no choice, he said softly, signaling to his soldiers. We will take you by force if we must. Marcus stepped in front of Zara, his body tense and ready. You're not taking her. The leader raised a hand, and his soldiers immediately raised their weapons, aiming them at Marcus. Zara's eyes glowed softly, the air around her crackling with the promise of power. She didn't need to say a word. The energy around them shifted, and Marcus could feel it, too, an overwhelming surge of raw, untamed power flowing through Zara. Before anyone could react, Zara's powers flared to life. The air around her shimmered, and a shockwave of energy burst outward, knocking the soldiers back. They fell, scrambling to regain their footing as the ground trembled beneath them. The leader didn't move. He simply watched, his eyes narrowing as he studied Zara. She was in control, but barely. Marcus could see the effort it took for her to keep the storm of energy contained. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was fighting for something much larger than herself. You don't have to do this, the leader said, his voice almost pleading. You can be part of something greater. You don't have to fight us. Zara's expression softened, but only for a moment. She shook her head, her eyes locked on the leader with a quiet, unwavering determination. No, I'm not your weapon. I'm not anyone's weapon. With a final surge of energy, Zara's power pulsed outward, sending the leader and his soldiers stumbling back. They were caught off guard by the strength of her abilities, unable to fight back against her control of the very elements. But Zara didn't press the attack. She held them at bay, the storm of energy crackling around her. The leader stood, brushing himself off as he wiped the dirt from his robes. He looked at Zara one last time, his eyes full of a mixture of respect and frustration. This isn't over, Zara, he said, his voice heavy with finality. You may have won today, but the galaxy will never forget you. You cannot hide forever. Zara met his gaze, her voice calm and resolute. I don't need the galaxy's approval. I will do things my way. The leader nodded, acknowledging her strength. Very well. But know this, you cannot outrun your destiny forever. With that, the leader turned, signaling for his soldiers to retreat. They filed into their ship, and without another word, the doors closed, and the craft lifted off into the night sky. Marcus stood beside Zara, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that the battle wasn't over. The galaxy wouldn't forget about her, and neither would the Union. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of hope. Zara had made her choice. She had found her path. And no matter what the galaxy threw at them next, they would face it together.